An luminous ball of light within it.
What's all that noise?
That is where we had our experience with the crawler. Welcome to Friday Night Ghost Frights. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. Explore with us. Black Bear Church and Cemetery was our first ever Friday Night Ghost Frights. We only told a piece of the tale, saving the rest for another time, and it is now our 50th Friday Night Ghost Frights. Over a year and a half later, we've told stories about many paranormal encounters, locations, haunted venues, legends, and more. For those of you who have not seen the very first Friday Night Ghost Frights, let me recap the tale that I told then. Black Bear Church is an abandoned church out in the middle of nowhere in Oklahoma. Technically it's Olive Township, but it's down a couple of dusty dirt roads and that's about it. Directly across the dirt path from it is the cemetery, which has a lot of the parishioners buried within. Now, the first time I was ever out there was in the middle of the night. It was right after an investigation that we had conducted, and one of the other investigators who had been out there a number of times and told us many times about this church and the things that happened within it invited us on out. And so we went. There were 3 of us that night. We had heard many stories already about the crawler that was there, about the short shadow people that came up to the windows, about scratches on the windows of cars, and many other tales. Well, when I first walked in, I had my camera at the ready, and the very first snapshot I took had an luminous ball of light within it. This was definitely not any piece of dust or moisture, as it had its own luminosity, and it was absolutely freaking huge, right above the pulpit area. We've gotten some interesting illuminated balls of light that look self-illuminated. I picked up one. It was probably like right about up here. Photos taken immediately after showed no sign of that illuminated ball of light again at all. Other photos that I took at the time showed, little balls within the windows, which were probably dust, although there was this one that is still debatable because it is half obscured underneath the cement as you're looking down into the basement area. I otherwise would normally chalk it up as dust, but the fact that it is actually, you can actually tell it's underneath, leads me to believe that it might be something different, but at this point it's inconclusive. Well, being that we were out in the middle of nowhere in Oklahoma, wouldn't you know it, but coyotes were approaching. Their howling was getting closer and closer to the church. So we took off over to the cemetery. In fact, they'd gotten so close that we actually got in the car to go over to the cemetery. And remember, this is just a narrow dirt road. This wasn't any more than about 40 feet. And we drove over there to the cemetery, went inside, closed the gate behind us for protection. Yes, we used a cemetery for protection. Well, the cemetery was actually very quiet. Aside from the coyotes that were passing, there wasn't a lot going on. We checked out some of the bigger headstones, some of the more obscure, even the marker of the unknown cowboy off in the corner. We finally decided that that was going to be a night for us, and the 2 others decided to head off toward the car, while I decided to make one last sweep of the cemetery, just to walk amongst the headstones. Well, it was during this walk amongst the headstones while the other 2 were off in the car that I actually caught the most unusual EVP that I ever have to date. And that is, my teeth are warm. Other people hear other things. Some agree with me, some don't. But what I hear is my teeth are warm.
My teeth are warm. My teeth are warm. My teeth are warm.
Well, I didn't actually hear that EVP with my own ears. That was caught later during an audio review. And so basically I just walked through the headstones and back to the car. And as I was getting in, putting my equipment away, what have you, we heard footsteps coming down the road from, off in the distance a little ways. We thought, there was some local farmer that was maybe coming down, check out what we were doing. After all, with the cameras, there were lights that were flashing and what have you. We had flashlights out, so somebody may have thought we were kids playing out in the cemetery and were, coming to shoo us off. Well, again, because of the coyotes, we didn't want to risk anything. We got in the car and we started driving down the road. We were going to actually, approach the person and talk to them, explain what we were doing and all that. We kept driving and driving, And we drove all the way to the next intersection, which was probably a good at least quarter-mile off. And there was not a soul to be found.
Is it my imagination or is it still like...
So like what?
What's all that noise?
We heard earlier.
Someone's walking down the road. We got in the car and drove all the way down because they were that loud. We thought somebody was truly walking our way. Now all that was just in our first night there, my first experience with Black Bear Church and Cemetery. Of course, there's much more that happened. In fact, one of the things that I was on my ghost story for was the crawler. Now this was during another investigation. We had other members of the team with us. We actually split up into 2 groups that particular night. While one group was off at the cemetery, we were down in the bowels of the church, in the basement area, and that is where we had our experience with the crawler. Now other people had usually seen the crawler around the rooftop of the actual church itself, the main sanctuary area. When it used to have a roof, people would see the crawler there along the roof. And basically imagine this spindly shadow entity, a little bit shorter than an average male, lanky though, and just crawling like a crab along the walls and along the ceiling. And that is usually what people saw. Well, we actually experienced this crawler down in the basement, which is very small. Well, while we were investigating the basement, it entered and started doing its crawling along the walls, up near the top of the ceiling. It got near the windows sometimes, which is really kind of when we saw it because it was very, very dark in that basement. And then we heard it along the floor, and then it kicked a plastic bottle across the floor, which scared one of the other members of the group. That happened to be our psychic medium at the time, and she suggested that we started singing church hymns to create some positive energy and make the crawler go away.
I hear it
Like
it
lightened.
There's someone standing in that window.
Yeah, there's...
Spiking on the
It looks
kid
like it's
too.
in it all.
Oh my God, look. Told you guys, it's spiking right now.
It's in it all.
You got the camera on?
Yes, he does.
I've got chills.
I've got chills too.
Yes.
I feel good.
Yeah, I
it
get
feels
chills.
better. It feels better.
That's lighter.
We're overpowering.
Yes, there's the crawler.
What?
Scared the crap out of me.
The crawler.
Jumped right on me.
Downstairs.
What was it?
The crawler.
Okay, we should say a prayer.
Temptation. To aid us from evil.
Amen.
Telling you something is screwing over what they're here.
The plastic bottle on the floor?
Yes, but they're making sounds and moving the bottle and everything. Something. Are y'all not hearing it?
No.
No.
I'm thinking of like good thoughts.
Did you not hear it, Kathy? I didn't move. Tell me it's that freaking crawler. I did not move. Well, I swear to you guys, I didn't move.
We believe you. We believe you.
Did you get it?
Did you not hear it?
I
Did you
heard
not
that.
hear the
I heard
thump
that.
on the freaking metal?
I heard that.
Okay, I did not move
I
it.
just
I
heard
did
it
not hear
again. Unless that was you, Dustin.
I just moved, but I didn't hit any metal. To sing God's praise.
that. Did you see that? Did you hear that? Did you hear that?
Yeah.
That was not me. Somebody hit that bottle.
So we did this. We sang some church hymns, and it did leave the basement area, and the feeling, the heavy feeling that had really encompassed the entire area, it cleared up. But I will say this, when we filmed for My Ghost Story, they did ask us to film a recreation of that singing, and thank God they did not use that within the actual show. It was terrible. Well, we did end up switching with the team that was at the cemetery. We went over there for a little while, which again, the cemetery is such a lighter feel than the actual church itself. That church out there has a very, very dark feeling to it. And I do want to say this about my ideas of the crawler that's out there. In one of the back rooms of the church, there's a stone slab that is sitting back there. And we have found evidence of burnt animal remains back there, burnt bones, charring on this stone slab. And so it does look like some occult work has been at least attempted back there. In the past, on this stone slab here, there have been some animal bones found, look like animal sacrifices being done here. Now, I do want to reiterate that in no way do I mean that those who went to the church when it was a functioning church actually practiced occult activity back there. It was people after, probably long after the church closed up, which seemed to be late 60s, early 70s, that if we were finding these remains in 2010, 2011, that was a lot more recent than when the church closed down. I kind of have to throw that out there because the owners didn't like my original Ghosts and Legends episode on Black Bear Church and Cemetery. I never meant to say they did that, and actually that's not what I said at all. In any case, it is possible that this crawler, and if the short shadow people that come up to the windows outside the church are in some way controlled by this crawler, as some speculate, that it could have been conjured through these attempted occult practices. But there's really no way to know for sure, it's pure speculation. So we went across to the cemetery, which I said is a much lighter experience than the church itself, which you would think would be opposite, right? Again, not a whole lot was going on in the cemetery at that time. Our psychic who was with us then thought that she was making contact with somebody called Bartholomew Jenkins, but we were never able to actually confirm this name with anybody that actually existed in the area at that time. But I did capture another interesting EVP. So we were again amongst the headstones and taking a little bit of a closer look. I noticed that this one individual had a second stone. One was a personal stone, which seemed to be from the family, and another was from the military. And so I made this observation to one of our other investigators. And in this clip, you hear him say, as I'm explaining this, and then you hear a voice say, correct, basically confirming my observation. 1920-2005 was exactly the same as the one behind it. Really kind of interesting to have that sort of intelligent response to something that we were talking about with the headstones. There's a second marker for John right here from the Navy. So he's got two markers. So again, another interesting time out at Black Bear Church and Cemetery. But we're not quite done. There was one other small encounter later on. It was actually following an investigation at the 101 Ranch up in Ponca City. When we finished that investigation, we're traveling back south. The guy that I was with had never visited Black Bear Church. He'd heard all the stories of our experiences there, and so I decided to show him where it was and take him on the little tour. Well, something that I caught on video that I really didn't realize at the time, but we were back down in that basement area, and I caught a small illuminated ball of light kind of shooting across the basement area. Wasn't very big, wasn't a lot going on at that time. It was just a very quick in and out, but still something else going on in that basement where we had previously seen the crawler. There's kids that come in here all the time and do stuff. I think they've just kind of accepted that happens. Roof burned out. It used to be here just a couple years ago apparently.
Oh, really?
But it burned out. There's a lot of strange things that happen here. Through the windows here, a lot of times you'll see like shadow people peeking in at you.
It's a little building back here.
It's like a little outhouse or something, a little storage shed of some sort.
I'm joking. Yeah, floor sagging. Look at that. Look at that. So where did you see the crawler at?
There was she was standing here. There was a plastic bottle on the ground, which when she recites the tale, she says it's a can.
Awesome.
A plastic bottle. So, Black Bear Church. It was originally the New Bethany Baptist Church, and it served the local community there, the farming community, for quite a number of decades during the 1900s. Unfortunately, though, it did end up closing down, and all that remains are these ruins. Of significant note, they did raise a lot of money for the World War II effort during a scrap metal drive during the 1940s. But today, it really is a shell of its former self, desecrated by the number of teenagers that have gone in there to party, drink, and graffiti the walls. But who knows who else may have been in there to conjure something up. What lurks in a desecrated church? We may never really know what was conjured there. What lingers in the cemetery off the beaten path? And whose phantom footsteps are walking down an old dirt road? Thank you for watching Friday Night Ghost Frights. Please let me know what you think of our new show in the comments below. And if you have not yet, please subscribe. This is Mike Ricksecker. Until next Friday night.